Welcome to the plantation. I'm your host, Master Lou. Yeah, I've been sick, trying to recover. Physically, it has been quite extreme. Yes, the flu has had me by the balls, but nonetheless, I'm still alive. I'm well. I'm still here. Thank you to those that are reading my content. I write opinion pieces. These are current affairs, international relations, diplomacy, geopolitics, economic policy, all of that. I write about that on Substack. I also publish my articles on LinkedIn, and I also publish my content or my articles on Medium. So therefore, whenever you don't see any YouTube videos, please note that I'm writing and look out for my posts. And yes, this coming January 2027, I shall be publishing my work in an academic review journal. This will be published by Taylor and Francis. It's a special 7th or 27th edition, I'm not mistaken. But I'm going to be writing about the Horn of Africa, state without policy war making. Well, that is just, I had a title as per my abstract. So basically, I've submitted a abstract to the University of Pretoria as well as the University of Johannesburg. Shout out to the two individuals that oversaw my work and did the relevant fact checking and necessary background checks. So my abstract got accepted, and yes, as long as I adhere to the deadlines and required criteria as part of academic or academia, then my work shall be published in the Taylor and Francis 2027 special edition that is also endorsed by the South African Political Science Association or South African Political Association. One of the two. I just cannot get to the exact name, but nonetheless, my work will be appearing in an official academic peer-reviewed journal. So I will be bringing solutions not only to South Africa but for the entire continent of Africa based upon the subject matter that I need to unpack and analyze as well as engage upon. So look out for that. That special edition shall be coming, published and endorsed by your Master Lou. Nonetheless, I'm glad it's a huge achievement because for the first time my work is actually being recognized. And this is now going to be recognized on the global scale, not only in South Africa, but this will be read and viewed across multiple platforms. I will send a link to the official publication, and also I will include my actual contribution to the academic journal that is peer reviewed and that shall be published by Taylor and Francis. Now, let's get cracking. Not too long ago, we heard about the Constitutional Court on May the 8th about the Phala matter. Now, as we can understand, according to the Kruger National Park, South Africa's famed Big Five consists of a lion, a leopard, a rhinoceros, elephant, and the infamous buffalo. Now, this has become very symbolic for South Africans. Nonetheless, this is also a symbol of our wildlife heritage as well as our global tourism identity. Wherever you want to know more about South Africa's wildlife, you'll always see that there's a picture of the Big Five. That is absolutely fucking amazing. And prime locations for these sightings across South Africa, well, namely are as follows: the Pallinsberg National Park, the Madikwe Game Reserve, and also the Kruger National Park. Shout out to the three entities that are doing magnificent work in ensuring and sustaining and maintaining our wildlife. Now, recently, South Africa's own political landscape can be characterized alongside the lines of the Big Five. Now, this is centered on power, privilege, and institutional contradiction. The highest court in the land, the Constitutional Court, not too long ago reaffirmed its position regarding the Phala scandal, which indeed is tied to the head of state, President Cyril Ramaphosa. Once again, this places emphasis on accountability, transparency, as well as constitutional integrity at the forefront of public discourse. Now, as of May 2026, as of the 8th of May 2026 to be accurate, the highest court in the land, the Constitutional Court, they reaffirmed their position that once again intense public scrutiny is around the constitutional democracy of South Africa. The court found out that the parliament itself acted unlawfully and outside the bounds of constitutional obligation when in fact December 2022 it voted against the establishment of an independent panel inquiry into President Cyril Ramaphosa concerning controversial Phala scandal farm robbery that took place at the time. In effect, the ruling overturned the parliamentary process that had politically insulated the president from facing an impeachment inquiry. So, technically, by default, as of the 8th of May 2026, as cited by the Constitutional Court of South Africa, they stated that Parliament acted unlawfully, inconsistent with the Constitution of South Africa, and therefore the initial independent panel Section 89 investigative report that basically laid out the allegations as backed up with prima facie evidence stating that there was some form of violations against the Constitution of South Africa by the head of state at the particular time. This parliamentary process that was followed, which was a vote, basically blocked and shielded President Cyril Ramaphosa from taking full accountability. And that is where the Constitutional pointed the flaw of Parliament not being consistent with the Constitution during the parliamentary process that resulted in the vote that blocked that accountability from happening. Now, second to that, what emerges also from this judgment is that the broader constitutional question regarding accountability, institutional integrity, and the selective application of democratic oversight. Now, the Constitutional Court effectively found fault with the National Assembly's rejection of Section 89 in the independent panel report, a report which had already pointed out prima facie evidence suggesting that the president had a case to answer regarding the concealment and handling of foreign currency that is linked to the 2020 Phala scandal. Now, the ruling, therefore, reopens a debate that many South Africans believe that had been politically buried. However, whether constitutional institutions genuinely prepared to uphold executive power accountable when they are confronted with allegations involving the highest office in the land, I beg to differ. Now, the court further determined that Rule 129 of the National Assembly, the very mechanism that was ultimately utilized to shield President Cyril Ramaphosa from deeper parliamentary scrutiny, was in itself inconsistent with the Constitution. Didn't I just mention this a few moments ago? The inconsistency from the announcement made by the Constitutional Court that Parliament did not act in good faith, but in fact they were disconnected from reality and they were indeed not in line with Constitution and what the Constitution of South Africa requires when it comes to accountability mechanisms, as well as matters where a high-level official such as the president is caught with his hands in the cookie jar. Now, further to that, the judgment obviously compels Parliament to revisit and reconsider the reconsider the independent Section 89 panel report, reopening the possibility of a formal impeachment inquiry into President Cyril Ramaphosa. Now, what many within various political circles, they attempted to politically neutralize the situation. However, this very same situation that they tried to neutralize is now at the center of the constitutional and parliamentary discourse. Now, the impeachment process, of course, once regarded as a politically buried matter, is now back on the table of reconsideration and back on the agenda. Now, at the core of this Phala scandal, the controversy still remains around the alleged concealment of approximately $4 million. According to my knowledge, Apparently, 580,000 US dollars were stolen and taken from the Phala farm. But according to Arthur Fraser's submission to the Parliamentary Committee regarding the incidents that took place at Phala, it is in fact that this is approximately $4 million. Now, the scandal itself has evolved beyond a criminal or procedural question. One needs to understand it now speaks to transparency, executive accountability because you are a head of state, and also the credibility of constitutional governance in South Africa. The political parties that basically drove this matter forward were initially the Economic Freedom Fighters, EFF, and also the ATM, not the Bank ATM, African Transformation Movement. Now, both of whom argued that Parliament indeed failed its constitutional obligation to exercise the necessary oversight over the President, obviously without fear, favor, or political convenience. Now, let us unpack what should have happened or what should happen post 8 May 2026 after the Constitutional Court's ruling. The National Assembly is now constitutionally compelled to establish a committee to interrogate and also assess the findings of the 2022 Section 89 Independent Panel Report. Obviously, a report which had already pointed to prima facie evidence suggesting potential violations of anti-corruption and constitutional obligations linked to the Phala scandal matter. Now, what Parliament previously attempted to politically contain definitely cannot now be ignored and cannot be procedurally buried. Now, it is important to remember that in the year 2022, the African National Congress, they had an outright parliamentary majority. The political reality is that significantly this complicated and frustrated efforts aimed at advancing an impeachment process against Cyril Ramaphosa. I do understand conflict of interest. You got a head of state that is the head of the country, and then you also got a leader of the party. So we need to understand party interests versus political and South African interests. In this particular situation, the ANC had an outright majority back in 2022. Now, of course, do you think the ANC is going to actually lodge an impeachment process against the ruling party, the man in charge? Highly impossible, because that's a conflict of interest. The same very party that you're representing the political interest for is also the very same party that you are having a head of state for running the country of South Africa. So that is a conflict of interest. The same party cannot be seen in a different circle and in a different setting holding the head of state accountable, which in fact that same head of state comes from the very same political party. That has to submerge their interests and ensure that their political interests are kept at bay. So therefore that accountability mechanism was not successful, and this explains why the Parliament oversight process in regarding the vote that took place, which basically shielded President Cyril Ramaphosa from true accountability, in fact was not in line with our Constitution of South Africa. That we now fully understand. So, part 2 of this, Action SA, ASA of course as many know them, and as well as the Democratic Alliance, the DA in other incidences, they have continued to call for full accountability, arguing that constitutional governance cannot be selectively applied, depending on the political office or the party position. That does make sense, according to my argument, based upon what they are calling for. Now, an impeachment committee that will be constituted, they will conduct hearings, of course, investigations. This could potentially lead to a lengthy, prolonged, and also highly public constitutional process. The political implications of this extend far beyond Parliament itself. Let's be real here. Especially as the country approaches the 2026 local government elections, where public trust, institutional credibility, and political accountability will increasingly dominate national discourse. Now, the President has repeatedly pledged his commitment towards due process. Fair enough, that's a noble thing of President Cyril Ramaphosa to do. However, this itself inevitably places the renewed scrutiny as well as his political and ethical suitability for office. Surely, if you are compromised, you should not be in office in the first place. But I guess our ANC loves compromised people. In essence, this matter, of course, now no longer exists solely as a legal issue. This is now just not about Phala and the theft of foreign currency. This now becomes a political legitimacy situation because, in all fairness, your image is tainted as a head of state of the country. Second to that, you are caught with your hands in the cookie jar, stuffing illegal foreign currency into a couch. Thirdly, you try to cover this up through a irregular parliamentary process by actually having a vote being done, and then in that same manner of instituting that vote, which was supposed to be a constitutional parliamentary process, that has now been found by the Constitutional Court as being not aligned with South Africa's constitution. So therefore, everything that you've done from the moment the money was taken, from the moment that you tried to cover up the situation, from the moment you got Parliament involved to actually exonerate you, all of that shit came to bite you back. So therefore, you are compromised. President Cyril Ramaphosa. Now, in relation to that, when I said political legitimacy, this indeed is a test of President Cyril Ramaphosa's political legitimacy in the wake of all of this bullshit that has been happening. Now, for the Government of National Unity, yes, the GNU, this matter becomes an undeniable litmus test. Now, coalition partners, of course, they inevitably will be required to clarify and reaffirm their positions regarding executive accountability, constitutional oversight, of course, and political ethics. Now, in turn, the continued handling and manner of handling not only threatens the image of the individual and the coalition parties, of course, this also threatens the broader credibility of the cohesion and stability of the Government of National Unity itself. Now, we should not forget, South Africans, the same South African Reserve Bank cleared President Cyril Ramaphosa from any violation of any foreign exchange control regulations in the 2020 Phala farm scandal. The same South African Reserve Bank in August 2023 decided that there was no perfected transaction for the foreign currency that was stolen, meaning that no contravention occurred. Then, fast forward, South African Federation of Trade Unions, SAFTU, they had previously mentioned this, and they have currently also asked President Cyril Ramaphosa to resign, following the explosive revelations about the concealed foreign currency theft at Phala farm. In relation to that, SAFTU also believes that the public protector and the governor of the South African Reserve Bank are indeed compromised. Now, no serious constitutional democracy can function when key oversight institutions lose all public credibility. That cannot happen under any given circumstances. Now, based on the above and the previous contestation of the initial independent report, blocked through a vote, we can say that perhaps there is maybe a little bit of integrity in the South African justice system. Maybe. Certain laws are still being upheld and applied in the wake of crime, corruption, and accountability. South Africans, let's be real, we love the Big Five. And let us not forget, the buffalo is also part of the Big Five. It is time, South Africans, let's wake up from the slumber. When you are in public office and you violate your oath under the Constitution of South Africa, you should take into account your actions as a public figure and as a kingmaker. Next, please do resign, Cyril Ramaphosa, and step aside. That's all we're asking you as South Africans. For whatever integrity is left in you as an African man, when you've thrown Ubuntu out of the window, we've got high unemployment in South Africa. We've got crime surging out of control. We've got rampant inequality. We've got service delivery failures. We've got a whole list of shit coming our way. We've got undocumented foreign nationals. We also have to deal with the immigration crisis that is crippling our communities, because on the one hand, you've got conservatives and all these NGOs that are saying that we're violating human rights by the manner and the approach in the way we're handling the immigration crisis. Yes, ask yourself this $1 million question, President Cyril Ramaphosa. If you allow foreigners to enter your country year after year and you're not taking and implementing protective measures, detecting measures, as well as governance measures in place in ensuring the sovereignty of South Africa, then by all means, you actually do not care about South Africa. In fact, you only care about your self serving interests as a president of this country. Let me make that clear. Let me make that clear. All the African nations that contributed to South Africa's independence during the exile of many of our leaders, we do not owe a debt of lifetime towards these African countries. And therefore, under our constitution, even though the preamble states that those South Africa belongs to all those who live in it. So that cannot be determined and cannot be interpreted as if every single African, whether you east, west, north, have the right, because somehow your exile leaders that used other African countries, we owe a lifetime of debt to these nations, and therefore, by justification, these people should enter our sovereign countries' borders. Without being documented, they will commit heinous crimes and do all the unnecessary shenanigans and do not take accountability, because guess what? South Africa owes them a debt. That's another form of mental and African slavery. Because no other African country owes another African country debt for the sake of helping them to liberate and get independence. South Africa is not Mother Teresa. We are not the country that needs to house the entire African continent. I still say this to all these so-called black Americans. So yes, I want to say this because this is part and parcel of the narrative and the global image of South Africa. Yes, we've got now the constitutional ruling against Cyril Ramaphosa, but we need to understand also where Cyril Ramaphosa has failed us as a country. And I'm pointing this out. The immigration crisis is not just merely foreign nationals coming into South Africa undocumented. We've had fucking Cecil John Rhodes taking land from the people that had no fucking South African passport in the first place. Second to that, they removed the natives from the land because they saw the lands were laden with minerals. Thirdly, if you are going to be a globalist, Cyril, then in all fairness, South Africa is just a company. South Africa has a board of directors, South Africa has shareholders, and South Africa also has employees and a security guard or security guards. The same can be said about the African continent. Africa is just a company. She has a board of directors, she has her shareholders, she has her employees, and she also has her security guards. So what do we expect from an African leader like President Cyril Ramaphosa? One thing I do ask of you, President Cyril Ramaphosa, with a little bit of integrity that you have left in you, do right by South Africans. Do right by your people. Do right by us. In fact, if you do not do right by your people and ourselves, South Africans specifically, that means you do not care for rule and law and order. And secondly, you do not actually give a damn about your citizens in this country. We bled during colonialism and neoliberalism. We bled during apartheid and segregation. We bled 32 years later because guess what? We do not have the land. Oh, and let me say this again. I know this is going to offend a lot of people, but we don't have the land and we don't own the land. Guess what? According to the 2017 Land Audit Report that was commissioned by the Department of Rural Development and Land Reform, colored people actually are the second largest landowners in the country. So before we say anything about land being returned, what are we doing with the land that we have as the second largest ethnic group that owns land in South Africa? What are we doing? Are we constantly saying that we cannot do anything? Or are we actually doing something with the land to ensure that everyone gets a fair share and everyone gets a fair reward from working the land? So I just wanted to point that out. Cyril Ramaphosa, Those are just some of the things that matter to us as South Africans. These are some of the things that our ancestors bled for. And these are some of the things that we are still bleeding for. The only difference is that between you not resigning, a revolution will occur. And the revolution was only postponed. And this is your moment in history, President Cyril Ramaphosa, where you need to do the right thing. For whatever integrity you may have or still have in you, do it right by South Africans, do right by your people. That's all I'm asking of you. Just do right by us. We don't care who your replacement is. We do not care who's incoming after you have left the office. However, all we ask is just do right by us. That's all. You can do whatever you've done after you finish your term or after you decided to resign from being a president of the country. I would recommend that, in all fairness, work on yourself as a man, focus on your business interests, and who knows, maybe step down as a shareholder of South Africa. Because guess what? Penwell the Black Pen said it, Prince Mashele said it, and I'm saying this. South Africa is a company. It has its board of directors, it has its shareholders, it also has its employees, and then it has the security guards. To, of course, if you're going to disrupt the status quo, we got these people in charge that will keep the unwanted away. Once again, thank you for listening. Master Lou, Plantation.